Hello, everybody. Welcome to Mindful Metal Jacket. I am Joe List. Happy summertime, 4th of July weekend to the American folks. Maybe there's some people listening overseas that don't care about the 4th of July. Maybe there's people right here in America that don't care about the 4th of July. Whatever you care about, whatever you love, however you feel, welcome. It's summertime here in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm enjoying the hell out of it. I love the summer. Isn't it strange to think? It's always hard to imagine the other seasons when you're in the midst of one season. I don't know what the metaphor is there. When I'm walking around, it's 85 degrees. I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, and it's hard to think about. Just a couple months ago, I was in thermal underwear and boots and winter coat and a hat, shivering. And but winter will be back upon us. The seasons are nice. I'm glad I live in an area that has seasons. I guess everywhere has seasons, but I guess extreme seasons. Whatever. I never know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I think I should rehearse these or write them beforehand. I'm just free flowing like a windy breeze on an old lake. How are you doing, folks? I hope you're doing well. It's been nice to hear from you. Thank you for all the extremely kind and thoughtful reviews on the iTunes. I don't know if it helps, but it helps me. It helps me feel good about myself and about the show, and it makes me feel of service. So I appreciate you writing those. I think it helps the podcast, maybe moves it up. The best thing you can do for the podcast is tell some people about it, tell some friends, email somebody. Go right now, copy the link, send it to a friend who's anxious or enjoys conversation or likes comedy, whatever it is. Share it, spread it around, tweet it, Instagram it. Unless you're taking a break from Twitter and Instagram, don't break your break for the sake of this show. I deleted Twitter off my phone. I've been enjoying the break. I've gone on a couple times to tweet something, but then I avoid going into the trending and the conversations and all that crap. Doing my best to stay away from the phone as much as possible. We talk about it on this episode. I got my friend Carmen Lynch on. She's got a new album called Vertically Obese. Highly recommend you go check it out. It's I don't think it's fully out. It's available for pre-sale right now, but that really helps the album when you go order it pre-sale. I don't know how anything works, but I guess it moves it up the chain or the ladder or trending or whatever. I don't know how it works, but make sure to check it out and listen to it. Carmen is one of my favorite comedians. Everybody I know that knows comedy, that loves comedy, loves Carmen's comedy. She is fantastic. And I only had her on the show because I love talking to her. I thought, hey, I'll get Carmen in here. We'll have a nice conversation. Always nice to talk to her. And I discovered on the show in real time, as you'll hear, that she is a sufferer of panic attacks and anxiety. So that was really interesting to learn. We talk a lot about panic attacks in this episode and how we deal with them. And we talk a little bit about fear of death. It gets a little heavy in there. And figuring out what you value with your time and trying to avoid social media. So it was a great conversation. I always enjoy talking to Carmen. She's a incredibly thoughtful person and very wise and smart and very funny, obviously, and just a genuine pleasure to be around and to talk to. So I think you'll enjoy that. And I recommend a nice break from social media, particularly Twitter and your phone in general, doing everything I can to do that. And but in the meantime, when you are using your phone, feel free to shoot me an email. I've gotten some really nice emails. And spread the word about the show if you could. Trying to grow it and do our little part in making perhaps a kinder and gentler world, even if it's just for you, the person that is sitting there listening to this right now. A couple quotes come to mind. Let's give you a little love and wisdom. I had one prepared, but this one just came into my butt. I believe the Dalai Lama said, if you think you're too small to change, I blew it. Oh, God, we're not even going to edit it. We're just going to leave it, Maybe I'll have to just finish this. I'll tease it and do this quote next week. Here's the quote. I had prepared already. Carmen and I talk about Eckhart Tolle quite a bit, and here's a quote from him that I enjoyed. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. That's Eckhart Tolle. Check out his Instagram page or his YouTube. He's fantastic. His book, The Power of Now, helped change my life. And the other quote I was going to say, Dalai Lama, if you think you're too small to change the world, try sharing a tent with a mosquito. Folks? All right, enjoy my conversation with the wonderful Carmen Lynch. I'm going to go hate myself for screwing up this intro. Bye. We're recording. This is it. We're live.
I love it. Hi.
Hi, Carmen. We're here with Carmen Lynch. I will have given you like an intro. I'll do like a solo intro where I say
okay.
nice things, and then I'll do like a quote of some sort. And
I'm so glad I don't have to hear that nice intro, because that would just make me feel really uncomfortable.
No, that's ridiculous. What if it's terrible? What if I'm just like, this is a comic, I've seen her, she bombs a lot, and she's mean.
No one else could do the show, so I asked Carmen.
Yeah, it was fresh out of bodies. Well, this is, I'm happy to have you, because this is interesting to me, because I don't know you to be an anxious person, but you're saying you're perfect for this show, which makes me think that you are an anxious person.
Well, I just thought you asked me because you must have known, but I guess not. I do kind of tend to hide it. Like sometimes people are like, on stage, you look so comfortable. But I think I'm much better now. But when I first started stand-up, I was so nervous and I was constantly sweating and it was just so scary. I don't know why I still did it. I guess just the idea of stand-up just always, was bigger than the nerves.
Well, Sarah was always like that too. It still is like that. She gets really, really nervous before shows, like hours beforehand. And she's like 20 years in. Do you still have that now?
I get fidgety more than nervous. Like now I just get nervous if like, the president of HBO is coming, not that he would anyway, but I'm just saying like if somebody important is there, then I get really nervous because I'm like, I have to do a good job. But if it's just a regular show, I just get very like fidgety. I have to stretch and breathe and stuff, Yeah. But it's nothing like it was before.
Right. Yeah, all that stuff that still somehow feels like embarrassing, like you feel weird having to pace around and you act like you're not anxious.
I don't understand. Go ahead.
No, I was just like that feeling where like I'm pretending, I'm like, I'm not anxious. I'm just a crazy person. I like to move around and do push-ups instead of just being like, yeah, I'm anxious about the performing live for an audience of people.
Like, who was I talking to once? I think it was Mike Yard. And he's like, I've never been nervous. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, it's just, I get up there, whatever happens, happens. And I'm like, how? Like he just, he's just one example, but some people just can chit chat till the very last minute, even at an audition show. I have to be alone. I have to act like I have to almost hide so no one talks to me so I can focus,
Right. Maybe, first of all, Mike drinks a bunch before the show. Maybe that has something to do with it.
True.
And also, I think maybe, I'm just taking shots here. Some of it might be learned behavior and upbringing, but he's also, I feel like, lived kind of a hard life. Like
yeah.
He's told stories where he was like a drug dealer and in gunfights, and
he's gotten shot too.
Yeah, I think once you get shot, you gotta, doing stand-up at New York Comedy Club feels a little less.
Maybe I should have tried to have a harder life. That's true.
No, we should shoot each other before our shows.
Before the next show.
Well, you said an interesting thing about like continuing to go on because the idea of stand-up was like bigger than the nerves. I always talk about that with my therapist, where it's like I was so anxious. I'm scared of everything. I'm anxious about death, and I'm anxious about anxiety.
I'm so anxious about death. I'm so glad you said that. We have to talk about that later. Keep going, because I'm super anxious about death.
Great. I'm getting better with it. I have some things that might help.
Oh, good.
But to me, the greatest anxiety of all, my biggest fear of all, was to never pursue comedy. Like that trumped any fear of like taking the subway to the city, meeting strangers, performing for strangers, and taking a chance like that at no, to have no job security or anything like that. A bigger fear was to never try. That was my biggest fear, even bigger than everything else. Did you have
That's so
something like that?
funny because I never looked at it that way. I looked at it more like, well, I guess it's like stand up, but the idea of not being able to share my point of view, that sounds so narcissistic. Like I have things to say, but the idea of not being able, because I was very shy growing up. Like I shut myself out of like social situations because I wore a back brace, I had scoliosis. So I was just really like nervous about people seeing the real me or touching my back, you know. So I think, and then I was repressed because I lived in Spain and then I moved to the States when I was 8 and I had a little bit of an accent. My English wasn't perfect and people could tell, kids could tell, you know, and they would like laugh at certain things I said. So I always held back. So I think one day when I did stand up, I was like, oh my God, I get to say whatever I want. And that idea of sharing was bigger than anything.
Wow. See,
Yeah.
I relate to that so much. Not not the being an immigrant and having a back brace.
Well,
That's really
I mean, I
nerdy.
was
But
born here, but yeah.
oh, you
Yeah,
were
yeah,
born here.
yeah.
I thought you.
Yeah, I was born in California and then we lived in Spain till I was 8. But I lived there as a child until I was 8.
Oh,
But I
okay.
was born here, yeah.
So how long did you live in California before going to Spain?
I was 3 when we moved.
Oh, okay. So you're not an immigrant at all.
No. But I mean the developmental years, like I only spoke Spanish at my schools in Spain and then I came out here and I was like, you know, I was just shy, but I did things that were kind of stupid that
Right.
really embarrassed me. And I think that made me just kind of go, okay, then don't do anything because you don't want to get made fun of.
Right. Yeah, those are formative years, 4, 5, 6,
Yeah.
7. Yeah. Um, interesting. Shit, what was I gonna say? Something about, oh, but I was gonna say I relate to that a lot in that was the attraction of comedy to me, was I felt like I grew up in a big family, only one sibling, but we were always with my mother's siblings and all her kids. So there was always like 25 people, and I was the youngest of my generation of kids, which there were a bunch of us. And I always felt like a baby, and I got babied, and it was hard for me to get a word in, and also kind of picked on. And the idea of not feeling seen or heard, to use buzz terms, the idea of
Yeah.
like, now I have the microphone and everybody's listening to me, and that was really attractive and still is to
Me
me
too.
now.
Yes. The idea, that's why at first I thought it was just the idea of writing a joke because I love writing a new joke. And about 4 or 5 years into comedy, I quit because I was getting a lot of like negative feedback from my family because, you know, they're very traditional,
Right.
hence the big cross behind me. And then I just wrote. I was like, you know what, this isn't working, whatever, I'll just write a book. And then about a year later after I quit, I was like, wait a second, this is not what I like. My favorite part is going on stage,
Right. Yeah.
you know.
So I want to talk about your comedy a little bit. So when did you start, and when was that break?
I started around like right before 9/11.
Okay.
And I remember when that happened, I was like, oh, well, I can't perform now. It's really bad out, but I'm not getting shows anyway. So, but it was probably like 2000. And then around '04, I got Last Comic Standing and Premium Blend.
Oh, wow.
And then I just never did new jokes. I kind of just relied on the ones that worked because
Right.
I didn't know how to discipline myself. I've always had like a boss or someone to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So I was too scared to try new material. And then it just kind of I stopped maybe in '05, from '05 to like '06.
Wow. So you had TV credits and stopped.
Yeah, but it was, though, I guess maybe it was like end of '05. Like those had fizzled out by then, you
Right.
know? And you can't, you know, I mean, now we know, like when you get something, you got to keep the momentum going, like write new jokes, you know, write a book, da da da. And I didn't know that yet because I feel like I'd gotten things a little too soon. So I was like, oh, I'll just do my same 8 minutes all the time, the ones that were on, TV.
Right. Yeah.
And I felt really bored. And then I was like, my parents hate this. And then I just quit. I just
It's
stopped. I didn't quit. I just kind of just didn't tell anyone and I stopped.
yeah. It's like Nate Bargatze's old joke. There's no one to quit to.
Yeah.
And the time he used Cosby as an example, he's like, I can't just call Cosby and be like, listen, Bill, I'm out. There
Yeah.
really is. Even at our level now, as successful comedians, if we quit, it's still just people would just slowly be like, hey, I haven't seen Carmen in a while.
I
Like,
know. And it's funny when they say that, they never think that. They just go, have you been like shooting a movie or are you in LA? I'm like, I wish. No.
we were just talking about that. Like, we went down, there's a comedy show happening right now during quarantine down the street from our house at a diner. It's like an outdoor show. And we went down there to see the comics. And you realize you're like, it's good to see them, but some comics you go 3 or 4 months without seeing because everyone's on the road. You just don't bump into each other. But
Yeah.
we were laughing about that feeling in comedy. Sometimes you're like, where have you been? And people are like, here. We just haven't run into each other. It's like, I thought you were on the road. You're like, no, I didn't do anything. I've just been around. But
I know
anywho,
there's so many of us.
there's too many, but I'm hoping COVID,
I'm hoping COVID gets rid of the bad ones.
that's what everyone's hoping, but the bad ones never leave. They're
I
always around.
know. I know.
But it is a strange and interesting thing, the idea of like, because I went through that too. I did Live at Gotham in '08 was my first TV thing. And my instinct was, I'm also like an idiot alcoholic, but like my instinct was to take my foot off the gas of like, okay, I made it. Now I can
Exactly.
relax.
Yes.
Like,
It's the opposite, but nobody really tells you that.
no, I thought the same thing in my career when I would get like a manager or an agent. I'm like, phew, now I got someone working
Done.
for me. And they're
Yeah.
like, no, now I need a packet. I need a headshot. I need you to change your glasses and, lose weight or whatever. So yeah, it's weird. I guess this is probably for all fields. I mean, most people listening probably aren't comedians, but it's probably true of all fields that when you first get started, there's nobody really there to show you what to do. That's how I felt anyways.
Well, also we're in New York. Like I didn't even mean to do stand up. I came to New York to do acting and I just fell into it. I went to a show and I was like, this is a job. This looks amazing. Like
Right.
I didn't know it was an option. So I was just kind of doing it my way. I didn't know there were any rules or like, self-discipline, all that stuff. And then in New York, you're seen too soon. So if you do write good jokes, even if you're nervous still or shy, you get stuff almost too early, and
Right.
I found myself, Last Comic was the very first TV credit I had. And there were 20 of us in LA. And I'd been doing it like maybe 3 years. And I
Wow.
was with like Rich Voss and all these people. And I was so nervous. I was so happy when I didn't make it into the house. I can't even tell you. Like, I was so happy because I was so scared of the like Corey Kahaney and all these big, Russ Manif. I was scared of everybody.
It's so weird because a lot of those people now looking back, I do a lot of this with retrospectively thinking about things. Like a lot of those comics were probably like 8 years in at the time.
Yeah.
Or like 10 years in or something like that. It's weird to think now that we're closer to 20 years in, because I started in October of 2000. So not long, just about, I guess, 11 months before 9/11. Is that right? Yeah. So looking back, a lot of these things, there was guys you'd see and be like, wow, there's Dan Natterman. And I was like, he
I
was probably like
know.
7 years in at the time or something.
I know, that's so weird. I remember walking to the comic strip and I was like, Karen Bergreen is here,
Yeah.
And then Lucian passed me and I was like, oh, my life is going to change. I was
Right.
so nervous. I'm like, things are happening so quickly and I'm just writing jokes. That's all you have to do.
It's so interesting to look back on all those things. So you quit for what, a year you said, or a year and a half?
I just quit. And then about a year later, I realized I got a real job. I started dating like a civilian. My life was real. And And I was like, this sucks. And from then on, I never looked back. I didn't even care if anyone in my family said this isn't right. I didn't care if I was broke. In a way, I'm just really happy that happened, because I just had so many doubts in my head about what the right thing to do was. And then when I started performing again, I was like, this is it.
Wow. That's so interesting. And so your family was not supportive? Are they supportive now?
They were just scared. I mean, my dad's had the same job his whole life. He's been in the military, and then he worked, he retired and worked in the same job. My mom was a nurse her whole life. Every one of my Spanish relatives has had the same job. No one's in the arts. So everything I heard was either like, do you have health insurance? Do you have a 401k? And how are you going to meet someone? It's that whole, like, we need to get married and have kids thing.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a lot of pressure.
That seems to me to be one of the real difficulties with being a woman in comedy, is that it's not charming to be sleeping in your car at a rest stop or to have three roommates. You know what I mean? Like,
no, especially when I went to college and I was pre-med, so I had dreams that I didn't care that they changed, but they were like, what happened? Why did we pay all this money for you to go to school?
Yeah, see, I'm glad I never had to deal with that. I never went to a second of college, so.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, you could tell my parents were like, I thought you were going to do something other than like the open mic at Howard Johnson's in Boston on Wednesdays. But I've always felt, Sarah and I always talk about, like, if you want to start off as a woman doing like the road, it would be ideal to be independently wealthy. So you can be like, I'm staying at the Hilton. I don't need the condo. I'm not sharing a condo. I'm not staying in anyone's apartment, because.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I mean, there were certain hotels that I just, like, where are you staying? Oh, this cute little place. It's adorable. Like, you just you can't share certain things. But, the perks of stand-up is you never know when something good is going to happen. So as soon as I started doing like military tours, my dad was in the military. So all that just kind of opened their eyes to, Letterman was a thing, but at the beginning it was like, you're going where? How much do they pay you? Are they paying you? And after a while it was like, how much are they paying you? $1 million. Can you believe it? And then she's just stopped asking.
Right.
Because I was like, I can't deal.
Yeah, that's hard to explain. I remember one time my dad made me laugh, but I was doing some gig and I was still living at home, and I had a gig in like Western Massachusetts, and it was like a 3-hour ride or 2.5-hour car ride, and it was paying like, $50. And he's like, you're driving 5 hours round trip and you're going to work and they're going to pay you $50. And I was like, well, the work is easy. It's my favorite thing to do. So it's not really work. It's fun. And so I was like, just imagine it. Cause I had heard someone else say this. I was like, imagine there's just like a bucket with $50 in it, and I'm just driving up there to go pick it up.
Exactly.
And the rest is fun. And I was like, and he goes, well, why wouldn't you just tell him to mail it? Why not have him mail the $50? And he didn't get it or understand it, but it is hard to explain to somebody. And then it's funny because after that period ends, when you're trying to explain that you're driving 6 hours for $50, then later you have to try to explain to people, you're like, you got $5,000 to do 30 minutes. And you're like, because if it's like a corporate gig or a college gig, whatever it is, or like a special, you're like, yeah, but remember when I was getting paid $25? Like, if you factor it all out, basically over the last 20 years, I'm making $6 an hour.
It's so hard to understand. And then I remember people would ask me, like, people I barely even knew, they'd be like, well, how much do you make? And I'm like, well, how much do you make? I'm putting you on the spot now.
Right. It's a weird,
it's like we're an experiment,
Yeah, it's a strange profession. And also it's like, it's interesting because in show business, if you can call what we're doing show business, you're like in the lottery. So like, I've talked about this before, probably on this show, but like if you're a plumber or whatever, you're kind of making that amount of money, or most jobs. And then every once in a while you might get a bump up here and there, or a few percentages. But in showbiz, you could catch a couple breaks and all of a sudden be making $10 million a year. You go from making 40 grand to 15 million. So there is like some amount of that. Conversely though, you could go from making 75 grand to 3 grand or 0 grand in quarantine.
I mean, yeah, it's just basically we just have to budget and save all the time.
Right.
You know?
It's it's tricky. But so I want to go back to your anxiety. What's your anxiety like removed from comedy? Were you an anxious kid? Obviously you talked about that a little bit with the back brace and stuff. Is that where your anxiety began, coming back to the States?
Think it was a combination of things. Yeah, I think at some point I just started having panic attacks in my 20s, and they were really embarrassing because they were all like outside, like I was just sweating. Like you could just pour a glass of water on me. And this would happen on like first dates, you know? And eventually I just started drinking a lot so that I would get to the first date, like with a good buzz. And then my friend finally dragged me to her shrink and I started taking Klonopin and then I was fine. Now I just carry Klonopin in my purse just as like a security thing, but I almost never take it. Like it's gotten so much better.
Oh,
but
wow.
at first, I mean, it could have been a restaurant that was too packed and I was, you know, squished between two other people. It could have been an airplane, anything that felt claustrophobic. I just started sweating so bad.
Wow. So this is interesting because I did not know this about you, because I started suffering horrible panic attacks in my 20s and also drank, and I had Xanax. And I've gotten much better now. I haven't had a panic attack in a year, just over a year, about 13 months. And my previous one before that had been a couple of years. So, but yeah, in my 20s, I started having them. I would shake was like the main symptom I would have, like shaking, like insane, like, you know, Michael J. Fox in the winter. Like it would start off, you know, like in my neck or whatever, and I could feel like a little bit, and then my stomach, and then it would just start trembling. My hands would start to shake, and I'd start to feel like impending doom, and then kind of get that like tunnel vision.
Yep.
And it would get bad enough that I would have to like lay down on the floor. I would feel like freezing. That's how I would feel, goosebumps, and I would want to be like in a blanket. And very similarly, it started to happen because, as you know, like once you have a really bad panic attack, you start thinking, what if I have this panic attack on a date? What if I have it at the mall?
Yeah.
And then that brings it on.
Yeah. And my therapist would say that. She's like, you're just panicking about having a panic attack. And I'm like, so that's worse. Now it's like this 2-layered thing, you know? But for me, it was weird because nothing happened in high school. Then in college, I guess it just hid underneath all of the fraternity parties and drinking and, you know, alcohol everywhere. And then when I moved to New York, and I would drink all the time when I went out because it was like, New York City, oh my God, this girl from Virginia is living in New York City. And it was crazy. It was so much fun. And this is before stand-up. And then, you know, then if a guy asked me out and I met him drinking, you know, I'd go to the date, but I'd go sober. And then the first time it happened, because I had no idea that this was even inside of me. And then I would just, I mean, I have had guys just look at me like they thought I was having a stroke. It was just awful. I would just hold the menu up like this. I would be like, I think the air conditioner is broken in here. And he was like, no, I can feel it. It's like right there, you know? And then eventually I had to meet guys like in the park because rooms were it was just too claustrophobic. I had to be like, I'll see you at Central Park. And then it was outside and it was totally fine. It was so weird.
Wow. It's like COVID. You were ahead of your time.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't, because I never really went on dates. I never had to deal with that so much, I guess. But I feel like I would have fallen in love with you. Like if I saw a woman having a panic attack on a date, I would have been like, I got to marry this woman. I mean, this is like amazing.
It's amazing because it makes you feel so isolated, because I had never seen anyone experience this. And then the looks I would get, I mean, I don't think people were making fun of me, but they genuinely looked like concerned. Like, what the fuck is happening? Like, they wouldn't say that, you know? Like, one time I was waiting with this guy, we went to a Yankees game and we were on the platform of the subway, and it was just, you know, a really warm day, and there was no, you know, obviously no air conditioning down there. And he just got like right there, and I really liked him, but I was completely sober, and I was like, and then I just started going like this. And then, you know, when you feel the panic, you're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what's happening? And then it just gets worse.
Right.
And now, like, my makeup is off. Like, I look like shit. And I just want to jump in front of the train.
God, it's horrible to even like recall that. And that's the thing that, like you said, is so hard because you feel so isolated. And to me, it always felt like this had never happened to anybody before. I had this crazy thing that no one's ever heard of. And then when you go to like a doctor or talk to people about it, they don't really know about it. And their instinct is not to go, oh, that's a panic attack. They just go, geez, maybe you have this. And then if you go to a physical doctor, because you assume you're having a heart attack or a stroke or something's wrong, something neurological, and then they have to rule out everything. So like I remember getting like CAT scans and then had like a heart monitor on me and all this like crazy shit, which just increased the anxiety. And it was like a while before someone was like, maybe you're having panic attacks. And then you're like, oh, okay.
I didn't even know to do that. I just kind of accepted it and just drank, you know? It was,
I did that as well.
I just drank, and then I remember even it got so bad that if I met friends at a bar and I didn't know the bar, I didn't know how many people were going to be in the bar. I didn't know if I was going to talk to like a cute guy or if he was going to get really close. The closeness is a big one. Like if I didn't know the variables, I got nervous. So I would go to a bar and drink and then go to the bar, the real bar where I was meeting my friends.
Yeah, I did a lot.
Because I didn't know that Klonopin was a thing. Once Klonopin was in my life changed.
But now, have you done since then? Are you still in therapy? Do you still go to therapy for this?
Oh yeah, therapy. Not for this, but just, and then I started stand-up. So this was all before stand-up. Wow. So when I started to do stand-up, I was still very nervous. I didn't always sweat on stage because it's the one-on-one and the close-up of like, you know, feeling intimidated or feeling self-conscious that did it. But if it was a bunch of people in the dark and they were all kind of seen as one person, that didn't make me nervous. So it was very weird to think that one person could make me nervous and like 1,000 didn't.
I feel the exact same way. I mean, I relate to all of that because I think for me, the way I interpret it wasn't, but maybe it is now that I'm thinking about it, it wasn't so much the closeness as the control. I'm in control of this situation. They're all sitting in the dark and I have the microphone and somebody's going to throw them out or people get mad at them if they say anything. But the one-on-one, I'm no longer in control. And they could say something or ask me something or physically attack. It felt lack of control in the situation. Same with a date or at a party or whatever it was. And so I would also drink excessively because of it.
But that's why if there was one person in the audience who was even looking at me in like a judgmental way in the front row, or he was cute, or he was just kind of like, if that person was there, it would start anyway. Like it wasn't any show. I had bad shows too, where I was literally like sweating.
Wow.
Awful. And so that doesn't happen anymore though, but it used to happen a lot.
So for you, it's mostly the sweating. Did you shake too and kind of slur words or?
No, I had shortness of breath and sweatiness. And then I had chills, like you said, when you were cold, but that was because I was sweating. And then, you know, after sweating so much, you just feel cold.
Right.
The sweating stopped.
Now, what about, I'm interested in this too, because you did Letterman. What year did you do Letterman?
2012. I did it in 2015, but the first one was in 2012.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
just about the year before, about a year before me. I think I did 2014. I guess I can't even remember now. Jeez, it's so weird how it's like you do these things that are the most significant moment of your entire life, and then you're like, what year was that?
I
I
know.
think it was 2014 that I did it. So were you still dealing with this when you did Letterman, or had you discovered Klonopin at that time?
I discovered Klonopin, but I wouldn't take it for something like that because, it does make you a little drowsy and a little almost like dull
Yes.
after a while. Um, so I remember I talked to my therapist the morning of Letterman. And then, and the control thing is true as well, because all I had to do was do my 5 minutes. Like if I was doing an hour for HBO or something crazy like that, then I'm sure that day I would have taken something. But this was 5 minutes, and everything, as you know, was just literally taking care for you. It was, you're going to walk to this spot, you're going to do your 5 minutes, they're doing your makeup,
Right.
So it was a lot of meditation and therapy and just breathing before that.
Okay, so at what point did you get into meditation? Because I love talking about
Well,
meditation.
I don't do it that much. I mean meditation more like just sitting, like doing it my own way, just breathing, Carmen, you're worthy, all that stuff.
Right.
But real meditation, I just started during the Corona. Like I'm starting to listen to Sam Harris and Eckhart Tolle I've been reading for years, but I haven't literally sat down and just told myself to meditate ever. And I'm just starting now.
Oh, those are two of my guys. I mean, Sam Harris is like my hero. I love that guy. And Eckhart, I talk about every episode. Power of Now is one of my favorite books.
He's the best. Yeah.
I go to his YouTube or Instagram
Me
page within
too.
like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I'm like, ah,
Yes.
no,
Well,
he's the best.
they both have very soothing voices too.
Yes.
And it bums me out that Eckhart's getting old because I don't want him to die ever because I've been listening to him for so long. But his YouTubes I go to all the time.
No, they're incredible. It's amazing. And he's actually like really funny too. Like he'll make
He's
jokes and
so funny.
it like kill. I'm like, this guy's murdering.
I know he's so good.
No, he's awesome. But so I want to go through Letterman because I had a similar experience because like I had dealt with the panic attacks, and it's funny because quitting drinking helped me a lot with my anxiety. But
So you didn't have stuff that like surfaced after the drinking, like the drinking went away, because that's kind of like the solution to issues. I feel like drinking is. Do you know what I mean? You didn't have things like come up once you stop drinking, because I feel like it's almost worse then.
see, things came up, but to me, I thought drinking was the solution for me, but it was just making it worse because I would just get my life was just like unmanageable. Like I would forget to do things and I wouldn't respond to calls and I would be double booked and I wouldn't cancel one of them until last minute. So like all of those things added to my anxiety. And I also was behaving in like insane because I got like crazy drunk and I would like, vandalize and black out and forget where I was and stuff, where it was just
all
like,
the time.
yeah. So this wasn't like making me feel any, it was adding to my anxiety. But eventually I went to a therapist way back then. And like when I first started having panic attacks and she helped with my panic attacks, they ended up coming back later. But when it was time to do Letterman, I had been sober for a year and hadn't had panic attacks in a few years. But the idea, I remember just imagining and being like, okay, it's time, like having a headset and be like, here we go. And I remember just thinking like, I'm going to lose my mind when that happens.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the movie Comedian, like shortly before I went and did my late night and like watching Orny Adams, like take the elevator down. And it gave me like almost an anxiety attack watching that, thinking about it.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, I did take something because the funny part is, what made me really nervous about late night is because at that point I knew that people who get too close, it was too much. It made me anxious. So the makeup people could make me sweat like this.
interesting.
So anytime I get a lot of makeup done or something, that sometimes I have to like take a Klonopin.
It's funny. I get really nervous in the makeup chair too because it starts to feel real, and there's
Yeah.
something about you've been taken outside of your world. Because in the dressing room, you're kind of in control, and everybody's like, "What can I do for
Yes.
you?" And you're
Yeah.
pacing, and you're like, "Could you quiet down? And could you just tell me?" When you're in the makeup room, you've lost your friends. You're out of that space,
Yes.
and then they're just. This is what's always so fascinating about these TV things. Everybody else is just living their life. They're just at their job that they're at every day. So the makeup
Yeah.
lady is watching, Sarah Jessica Raphael or whatever, and she's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
kooky," and you're like just freaking out. And they're not trained in mental health or anything. They're just like, "You'll be fine," or whatever. It starts to get freaky. But so when you were right before you were going out for Letterman, were you sweating and nervous? Did you feel really calm or?
No, because if I took it for like the makeup, I would first of all for anything like that, I would never take too much because I was almost more afraid of becoming dull and losing my, your sense of yourself, you know?
Right.
And so if I took one, I would take it like early and maybe like break a little piece. It was just enough to get me going where I could still be a little nervous and but not sweat,
Right.
And the makeup chair, if I could get through the makeup chair, I could get through anything.
Right.
Because that's in your face. The actual show, the like Letterman, it feels like a regular show. To
Yeah.
me, I got more nervous because every late night I did, I think every single late night I've done except one, it always aired the next day. So that 24 hours after I was done and just waiting for it to air, that was my worst time. Because now I'm just going like, oh my God, you did that thing. Oh my God, what if this happened? Oh my God, what if you look shiny? What if, and I just, all this negative conversation in my head was driving me crazy. But I can handle that because I'm alone at this point. No one needs to see me,
Right.
you know?
God, it's so interesting. I remember my Letterman aired the next day too, but to me, for some reason, it felt like no, I guess that anxiety came in too. But for some reason, it felt like I did it, I survived it, because somehow my fear is always going to be with late night is I'm not going to be able to go out there. I just picture the host, Dave, being like, what is this? Like he's waiting, and they have to go up, and the guy with a headset has to be like, hey, the comic
Yeah.
couldn't come out, and he's like, what? And he's like, we don't have anything planned. Like, what? Get him out here. And I just picture
Yeah.
me getting pushed by like two stage-hands, and I'm trying to like run away. And they're like, you got to go out there. And that was always my big fear is like, I won't be able to go out there. But for
Did you
me,
take anything to like get yourself out there?
no, because people advised against, like you said, like
Yeah.
you want to be present for it. And
Yeah.
ultimately, it took me years to realize this and therapy and stuff. And Eckhart totally helped. But just the idea of that fear is just fear and your thoughts aren't reality, which has become like
Totally.
my mantra, is that it's just fear. And as my therapist always says, of course, like, of course you're anxious. Like, I'm so nervous. And he's like, of course, it makes sense. You should be nervous. You're on TV or whatever situation when you're anxious. Usually it's like, it makes sense. It's your body trying to, you're nervous. I mean, you have a nervous system. It's there for a reason. So it's no big
Now,
deal. It's just anxiety.
do you think that it's something nature or is it nurture? Like, do you think it's something like it runs in your family, or do you think if you had therapy at age 10 or your parents or guardians had been more like, let it all out, things are wonderful, stay, do you think it would have changed you?
I think, well, my therapist is, and I've heard people be like, he's completely incorrect, but my therapist, who I love and treasure, um, he says it's all learned behavior. His thought is there's some things like, you know, bipolar or maybe a couple things that are hereditary neurological diseases or whatever, but most behavior is learned. And my mother's extremely anxious. My father had anxiety, and his brother had panic attacks. And I think it's more the way I was raised and my family, the way my
Yeah.
family connects and responds to things is sort of trained. I don't know, but I think about that all the time. I'm like, if I grew up in, Haleiwa, Hawaii, would I be completely different? Would I be like surf
Yeah.
guy and hey man, all right, it's cool?
Yeah.
Or would I be this way? I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's everything you said, because I mean, my father comes from an alcoholic side, and I think that generation, no one in my family has ever been to therapy before. So
Mhm.
I think they just learned how to just deal with it. And they've never really had to live outside of their bubble. So, you know, my parents met quickly, they got married, they're still together. So they didn't have, I mean, they had their own struggles, but like, maybe they just never had to deal with therapy or medication, you
Yeah,
know? It's just
yeah,
a
no,
different world.
totally. My parents the same way. They got married really young, and they got pregnant with my sister, and then they were just sort of together. And my father's sort of Boston Irish Catholic, not a lot of feelings, and it was a lot of my mother sort of was overly protective, and there was a lot of, I think, my family, the adults just talked pretty plainly around kids. So there was a lot of
Yeah.
revealing a lot of what could go wrong in life, of like, we don't want anyone breaking in the house. We got to put the locks up because people will just break it. Stuff
Totally.
like
Yeah.
that, where you're like, what? And then,
Yeah.
like, I remember my uncle, who's like 4 years older than me. I always have to say, I say uncle, people think he's 30 years older than me.
Yeah.
But some friends that were my age essentially got jumped down the end of my street. Like, they got mugged, and it's funny that there's sirens going off while I'm talking about getting mugged.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but
Rest in.
they got mugged when I was 11. It was during the '93 World Series, I remember, and like there was just like, oh my god, we got mugged, and like we got to call the police. They just jumped out of the bushes, and to me, like I was just like, oh my god, like people can jump out of the bushes, like, and no one ever sat me down to be like, listen, like bad things happen, but most likely they won't. And I can remember driving through bad neighborhoods and my family being like, lock the doors, people, and the idea that like, wait, someone could just open our car door and pull us out of here, like there was a lot of stuff like that, that you're like, geez, this is crazy. And so I think it just put this
Yeah.
crazy fear in you, and this feeling of lack of control was really scary. I don't know. I mean, those are some thoughts that I've had that could lead me to feel that way.
Yeah, I remember moving to New York, and at some point, I mean, it was such a, I guess I was living in a sort of a bubble coming from Virginia, but then moving to New York, I was like, this is crazy and amazing, and look at all these opportunities. But then one day it hit me like, it's almost like I almost wasn't ready mentally to deal with anything,
Right.
and that's when I went through this, I need to talk to somebody. Because in that generation, especially in my family, you don't go see a therapist that's like for crazy people.
Yes. Same. No, I felt
It's
that.
it's not to improve yourself.
Yeah.
It's because you need to build, you are bipolar or schizophrenic or something.
Yes, exactly. It's something that you go see if you have like a straight jacket on. It's just the walls are white and everyone's wearing white,
Yeah.
and it's not something that just regular people go to. But I mean, I couldn't recommend it more. Um, but also, there was no time to really process things. There was no like. I mean, I'm a big believer now that like meditation should be taught in like public schools when you're like 6. Time to like
Yeah.
sit and reflect and focus on your breath and kind of go inward, um,
Yeah.
which I've only learned in the last couple of years through Eckhart Tolle and Sam Harris and Jack Cornfield and all these great meditation people, and getting really into meditation and therapy, of course, which I also think is so important because it's more you and specific to you and your family.
And it's exercising your brain, your mental, it's not a bad thing. It just has this negative connotation like you're crazy. I want to ask you about the quarantine, because what happened to me is, even with years of therapy, when stand up ended, I became so anxious because I was like, what are you going to do now? what are you going to do with all this time on your hands? And I just got um, very anxious. And I knew, when you know something intellectually and your therapist tells you, but you don't practice it, like I knew I was running away from stuff. I know that like I avoid things by like, oh, I'll just go to the gym, or I'll just go to Spain and see my sister. Like I know I do that, but I never really went inward to see what it is that I was running from. But not because I didn't want to, but I just couldn't figure it out. So I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to do road gigs all the time and just leave all the time. And then the quarantine happened and I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? And then we figured out that, everything is a distraction. Everything I do is not everything, like, but it felt like I was just using everything to just stop from looking inside. And then I realized through Eckhart that there's like being and doing, and everything I was doing was to do something, and I wasn't sitting still to just be.
Right.
And that has been my biggest thing in the quarantine, is like whenever I get up and I want to go do, I just check in and I go, so cheesy, but I'm like, just be,
Yes.
And every workout I do, everything is fast paced because it makes me feel like I'm running away. And now I'm doing the opposite, where I'm like, yoga, meditate, just be. And it's crazy. It's hard for me. I'm not going to lie. It's really hard.
Well, that reminds me of one of my favorite Buddhist sayings that you've probably heard is, don't just do something, sit there.
That's
You ever
really
hear that
funny.
one?
Yeah.
I mean, I love that one because I feel that way all the time. And Sam Harris talks about this too, this idea of that we all have this limited time, what to do with our time. And instead of thinking we have limited time, so we got to get as much done as possible, it's like we have limited time, so we should slow things down and do less things and have more quality time because we have a limited time. But
it's so hard in this career that we have, not that no one else has this problem, but like in ours, I feel like it's, we got to go to the airport. Oh, we got to pack. Is it tomorrow? And then we have a podcast and we have a show, and then we're not going to say no to anything because you never know when this is going to dry up or, whatever. And you want to take every opportunity. So I'm just constantly like just doing. And then I'm complaining about why it feels like it was just Friday and now it's Friday again. And why is time going by so fast? And my therapist is like, just chill.
Right.
And I'm like, but there's a show tonight and so-and-so is going to be there. And I want to, it's so hard.
That's why I've really enjoyed, like, flourished in quarantine, because I've spent so much time meditating and listening to meditation speakers and these Buddhist speakers, and I'm reading more.
Yes.
And I started meeting up with some friends 3 times a week and talking about our problems and working on this podcast. And part of with comedy, what's strange about it to me is you're always scheduling down the road. Like you have to be like, all right, like my agent's like, and I'm getting booked further and further out. So he's like, okay, here's a date from March of 2021. So you're like, wait, I'm already planning 7 months from now. So mentally, and then like when you're giving your avails for spots, you're giving them a month in advance and a week in advance. So you're always thinking about next Thursday and next June. And then what do I have on August? Whereas in some jobs, and don't get me wrong, I think I'd rather be a comedian than any other job, but most jobs you just go, okay, this is what I'm working. I'm working here for the next whatever. You're not thinking 9 months in advance.
Right.
Whereas comedy, you have to kind of make these decisions of like, do you want to do Tampa in February? And you're like, okay, I get it. So you are always, and like you said, you're packing for Thursday. And for me, September through December, I flew every weekend, like 17 weeks in a row. So you're flying Sunday and you're flying Thursday, and then you're flying Sunday, and it is a lot to deal with. And again, I never want to sound like we're taking away from people that are on a hot roof every day roofing.
Right.
But just specifically, I can only speak to my own experience. That makes it a very stressful job. So everything shutting down has definitely changed my perspective and makes me want to go a lot slower moving forward.
Well, now it does. Like it took me a while, but I want to do things that I don't ever do in a regular, non-COVID season, like reading, like you said. I used to be very anxious reading because I'm like, why am I reading a book? I should be writing a joke,
Right.
or checking my phone. And it's funny, like now I've slowed down on social media. I haven't even thought about it, but I'm just like, oh, I haven't posted something in 3 days. But, not that that's bad or good, but it's, I guess your brain just shifts and you're just like, well, I could just go bike riding today, and stare at a tree,
Right.
and that kind of stuff is coming in more than it used to.
Yeah, well, I'm having that experience too. And this is another thing that Sam Harris is always talking about. And then pretty much any other mental health expert and neuroscientist is talking about is that the phones and social media are really quite destructive to our brain chemistry, and our relationships. And it's really sick. So I took Twitter off my phone, which is really
Mm-hmm.
helping me, because that's just a cesspool of negativity. I apologize to the fans for not favoriting their tweets immediately, which I do feel like guilt about. I'm like, oh, I gotta go to my tweets and hit favorite. People will get mad if they write something nice and I don't favorite it. But I'm trying to let go of that and be more present with people and do more calling friends and
Yeah.
family and checking in with them, and then having actual discussions instead of just text or emails and Twitter and stuff.
Yeah. And then I try to do what Eckhart says, which is like to, stay present. So if you're emptying the dishwasher, you're like looking at the dish
Right.
and, not thinking about what you're going to do next. But that kind of stuff is hard.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think it's really hard.
and it's reprogramming your entire brain and system. And we put so much value on maximizing our time. Like,
Yeah.
you're in line at Starbucks, you're like, let me send these emails. That way I'm waiting for my coffee, but I'm also sending emails. And then, like,
Yeah.
while your podcast is uploading, you're like, let me do some jumping jacks so I get a little head start on my exercise, or let me text while I'm waiting for the bus. It's all this stuff that we're never fully present for the actual activity because we're trying to multitask to save time. And what's so ironic is you do those things to free up time, and then in that free time, you end up looking at Instagram, like we're just watching TV or something.
I
So it's like
know.
we're freeing up time that we don't even use valuably.
Well, do you ever do this? Like you have a goal, so you're like, oh, I have to text so and so. You open your phone, you go to Instagram, and then you never text that person. And then you go, well, wait, I was gonna do something, and I can't remember what I was gonna do. And it's just that happens to me all the time. And I'm
All the
like, just go. Like it's almost like before you open the fridge, my mom would always say, before you open the fridge, figure out what you want. And I'm like, well, I can't because I don't know what's in the fridge. But like I want to take my phone and be like, okay, what are you gonna do? You're gonna write that email. And then almost always I don't. I'm like, oh look, so and so tweeted this.
Right. Yeah, that's another thing I do with the phone is that, like, I'll do something like this where we're having a great conversation for an hour, and then as soon as it ends, instead of sitting and processing it or feeling it, the first thing I do is pick up my phone. I'm
Yeah.
like, let me check Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email, and then respond to text. And then sometimes I'll do that, and I look and I'm like, we finished that podcast 40 minutes ago. Like, I just looked at my phone for 40 straight minutes.
Yes.
And now this, like, wonderfully meaningful conversation is just completely erased from my feeling and being, my soul, and I've just moved on to 9 other things. It's crazy.
I try to think of what I would be like on my deathbed and just be like, did you enjoy your life? And I don't want to be like, I'm so glad I tweeted so much, you know?
Exactly. I tweeted about that recently, that I'm like, I'm 100% sure my biggest regret will be looking at my phone too much, and yet I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
That's what a
Yeah.
strong addiction it is. It's crazy. There's no way any of us are going to be on our deathbed, if we're fortunate enough to die on a deathbed and not get
I
mauled
know.
by
Is
a
that such a
car.
thing? Yeah.
Um, but, like, there's no way anyone's like, God, I wish I had spent a little bit more time staring at my phone. I
I
mean,
know, it's weird.
Maybe
I
they
want
will.
to hear about your death fears though, because I have so many. Is there
Well,
any way I can go use the bathroom really fast? Is there such a thing as interrupting this or no?
sure.
You
Yeah, go for it.
sure?
I don't. Yeah,
Okay.
I think we can edit it. I'm sure my producer can edit it.
Because I want to ask you about death, but I really have to use the bathroom.
Yeah, yeah. Use the bathroom because I don't
Okay.
want you to
Okay.
die from using the bathroom. Okay,
Um,
we're back.
so my death issues, like I'm just I don't know where this came from, but about 2 years ago, I started freaking out about dying.
Oh
And
wow.
I'm like, I've known about death for, since I was born pretty much, or whenever you learn about it. But there's just this crazy fear that we're all going to have to say goodbye to each other. Isn't that weird? And it's out of my control. Like, I can't just tell myself, well, it's just normal. Like, it just creeped up on me like 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had that like cripplingly in my mid-20s.
Okay.
And it's gotten a little better, but God, where was I reading it? This book called that I talk about on every episode called The Antidote by Oliver Berkman, which is
Okay.
a great
You have to
book
text me.
that I
Yeah.
highly recommend. I'll text it to you after the podcast. But there's a whole chapter about like that we are like hardwired that you can't truly focus on your own death for more than about 6 seconds without your brain trying to switch off into some other thing. And it's actually like wild that we're able to do that any of us are able to carry on not thinking about this inevitable eternity of darkness.
But do you think that's true? Because I honestly think about it all the time. So I don't agree with that guy.
But you think about it, but do you think about it actually think about it sustained, or is it just coming back into your head and you try to watch a movie or a
Mm.
TV or whatever, like fully sustained thought about like, because I think if you like, for me, when I really think about like being gone and never coming back, no chance of ever
Yeah.
being alive in the earth again, like my brain, I start to be like, all right, woo, woo, and I'll start to pick up a book or look at something or find some porn to watch or something.
Yeah.
It's hard to, but like certainly I've obsessed over it where it keeps popping back into my head. Um, but I've read a bunch of things that we should spend time thinking about it because it allows you to feel gratitude for being alive and being able to see and feel and hear everything, because eventually we
Yeah.
won't be able to. And it is a thing that is uncontrollable. Like we are going to die. So it's like the ultimate,
Yeah.
like you need to accept it. But I have dealt with that and it's horrible.
Yeah. No, it's weird. And I find that the rushing to get as much done as I possibly can actually makes it worse, you know?
Yes.
Because I'm like, oh, we're dying, so that means we're running out of time. So I should do as much as I can. That's not true at all. It's the opposite, like you said. It's like, all right, slow things down and really just live your life doing what you really want to do.
Yeah. That
Don't
and
just jam it all in there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and trying to spend time figuring out what you really value, because it's so cliche, because but you we could really die at any moment.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, it is a lot of like realizing that, thinking about it, accepting it, and thinking about what we want to do with our time here and what we value. So I'm very grateful that you spent an hour on this podcast. but no, I used to have it when I in my 20s, especially when I was drinking. Like every single night when I was drinking, at some point I would get really, really down and bum
Uh-huh.
everybody out by being like, "We're all gonna die. This sucks." Um, but one thing I think about, and I talked about this, I think on last week's episode, is I remember talking to a comedian named Shane Moss and doing that and saying, "It sucks that we're gonna die," and he was like, "Well, it'd be worse if we didn't." So it would suck if we didn't die
Yeah.
also. Like it's kind of like there can be no good without bad, and there can be no bad without good. There can be no happy without sad. There can be
Right.
no up without down. There can be no life without death.
Well, I think the part about death that probably makes it more comfortable is that we age. So by the time, you're 80 and you have arthritis and your back hurts and you whatever, then you're like, please kill me now because I don't want to live like this anymore. We're thinking about it in a state where we still feel good, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, Alan Watts has talked about that. He's another guy I love. Alan Watts and Thich Nhat Hanh, who are two of my go-to guys. They both talk about that too. Is that when you imagine die, usually when death pops into your brain, the fear of it, it's usually when something good is happening. It's usually because you're enjoying yourself and you're happy. It speaks to the fact that you really enjoy life. You don't want to say goodbye to your friends and to your life and to comedy or your home, whatever it is. And so it's like your brain, it pops in that like, oh, we're going to lose all of this. It's really fear of loss. But those guys have talked about, you have to understand that you will get to a point and a moment when you're like, yeah, I'm ready. That was fun.
Yeah.
I'm happy to shuffle off now. But that's part of meditation, I think, too, is spending time acknowledging that will happen and there's nothing you can do about it, except you can try to control what you can control by eating well and exercising.
How long after meditation did you start to really feel a difference, like a positive difference?
It's hard to say because it's such a combination to me. Like this therapy I think is like the main thing that's really helped me. And then meditate, it took a while for meditation. I think everything, it takes a long time to actually get through to you. Everything your therapist says, everything like guided meditation says, and Eckhart and Alan Watts and Thich Nhat Hanh, all these people, you have to hear the same thing over and over again to kind of have it break through. So it's hard to say. I'm also like actively sober, which helps. That helps me. And but I think a few months, maybe even a year. I mean, I've been meditating for a long time, really consistently, like the last 8 months or a year or so, and it's really, I can feel it. Like I wake up anxious, then I start my day meditating, and I feel better throughout the day. And I usually do it again later in the day at some point. But mindfulness has helped a lot.
Yeah. When you have a panic attack, like you said a year ago, you had a panic attack. What do you do now to deal with it? Do you just go, I'm going to let this come out and just deal with it? Or, you know what I mean? Or do you panic about it?
That was the biggest thing that helped me. And that's another thing I had to hear 100 times before it actually got through and made sense to me, because it was so counterproductive. But to accept that you're having a panic attack and to just let it be, because the more you resist, the worse it gets. You have to be like, oh, here's a panic attack I'm having. This is temporary. It will go away. There's the thing where my leg shakes. Here's where I can't breathe properly. Right. And it kind of takes the teeth out of it. And also, you lose the thing that we talked about earlier, the fear of the panic attack.
Yeah.
The more you have them, the more you're like, oh, this is this thing. It lasts like 20 minutes at the most. And then afterwards, you feel kind of strangely good in a way, where you're like, woof, that's
like
over.
You defeated that.
Yeah.
But you know what? What's hard about that is that the times that I have it are important. So I'm not going to like do that on a TV show, or, I'm not going to just say, you know what, this time the makeup lady, I'm just going to let her do her thing, and just start sweating in the middle of the makeup session,
Yeah.
Like I had on a plane, which has not happened in years. I had a bad one on a plane about a year ago, and the plane was about to take off. And I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And it was just because I got the window seat and I usually get the aisle. I mean, it can be that stupid where I just feel trapped in the window seat. And we were already taking off. We were like this already. So if I didn't have that Klonopin, I'm like, would I have punched somebody? Like it got bad really fast. And even if it doesn't kick in immediately, the fact that I can just go get the Klonopin, take it, like it starts to just go away, because I know in my head that it's going to calm down in a second. It's just really weird. It's so, It's like
Yeah,
mind tricks, you know?
totally. Yeah, it feels like I've taken an action. I've done something to start to help. So the process has begun of me helping it. I feel that way with like even like hypochondria, of like thinking I have some kind of liver problem or eye problem, whatever it is. I used to have a lot worse. I would go to the doctor, and just by making the appointment, it would start to feel better. Being in the waiting room,
Yes.
talking to the
Yeah.
doctor, I would be like, okay, I'm whatever it is, I'm taking care of it. And then of course it would be nothing and go away. It was just anxiety. But um yeah,
Yeah, I find it would be hard to like try that in a situation where I didn't have it, because all those moments where I have it, they're kind of important. I don't know. They're kind of a big deal. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
totally. I mean, I had a panic attack on Conan, like right before walking out on Conan, and it was horrible. It was my worst nightmare come true. But I've talked about this before on this show.
Uh,
It ended up being amazing in a way, because I had this panic attack where I was shaking and I was like losing my mind, like my head was spinning, but I was able to still just do the set. I went out and said all the jokes,
yeah.
and I was freaking out, but no one else even knew. Like the audience was there, they were laughing, and my friends were like,
Yeah.
"What? I didn't know that." Nobody noticed. And so I had a panic attack at the exact worst time you could have one, and I was
Yeah.
fine. And that
Yeah.
like changed my whole being, my whole experience on earth, because it was like, oh, those panic attacks can't really do anything other
Right.
than make you shake and scared.
I would get really jealous of people like you because your panic attacks don't show, like they don't that you people can't tell, whereas like mine, like I remember having them a lot, years ago, and going like, why does it have to be sweating? Why can't my big toe just shake, or my pinky just like, freak out, why does it have to be like all in my face where people just look at me and go,
Right, right. Well, I think
you know
also it helps that like on TV it's harder to see. Like if you were standing next to me in real life, like my teeth would be shattering, but I was like talking
yeah.
through it and it kind of fended off. But like I've had it where like my teeth are like chattering so hard, I can't even like get a sentence out, and it's shaking. But
Yeah.
I think as it was on TV, I just kind of tried to really stay put. So like under my suit, I'm trembling, but it was hard to notice, and it
Yeah.
just looked like regular like TV nerves. Um,
That's awesome though,
but
that you got through it.
yeah, I mean, I was grateful for sure. But I think for me, now I've kind of slowly found this perfect concoction of like doing this show is helpful to me, and meditating and listening to Sam Harris and listening to Eckhart Tolle and reading Thich Nhat Hanh, and then going to therapy, and then reaching out to friends. It's like, and
Hmm.
I'm running, like doing cardio. I started doing like mixed martial art. Like I have to, it
Nice.
is like a full-time job for me to stay anywhere near an even keel.
Yeah. Yeah, but
That's
it's so worth it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it took me like 38 years to kind of be like,
Yeah.
oh, I think I'm starting to figure it out.
But don't you feel like if you had a child, you would be so ready to tell them everything? Like you would be such a good mentor to anyone,
I
you know?
I think so. I hope so. Yeah.
You would
But
just be like, all right, what's happening? Okay, let me tell you what to do.
right, right.
Which is what we didn't get, which is fine. But I'm just saying, like, you're so prepared to help others now.
Yeah, 100%. I think it would be better because I would be like, let's process what's going on. Let's
Yeah.
spend time no TV, no anything, just sitting and talking. And I think also, and I've talked about this before on the show, the most important thing you can do with a child is to respond to whatever they're saying and let them feel seen and heard, as people talk about so much these days.
Yeah.
And to be like, yes, that makes sense. That is a real, and to understand, I think that our parents' generation, when we were kids, did not really understand. This is like what Mr. Rogers was all about, is that children have real feelings and fears and emotions just like adults. All of their feelings and thoughts are just as real as adults, where people I think years ago thought children are just like, he's dumb, just give him let him watch TV, feed him, and
Yeah.
put him to bed. And in reality, it's like they have really real fears and concerns and empathy and all those things. They just can't articulate them yet.
They don't know how to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So we're making the world a better place.
I think so, a little bit, and we're bringing laughter and joy. And speaking of which, we got to wrap up, but I want to plug your special. You have a new special, or is it just an album?
It's just an album. It was my last weekend on the road. It was the very end of February at the Comedy Attic in Bloomington, Indiana. And I asked Jared, the owner, I'm like, can I just record it? Because, you know, things are looking like the world is going to end. And I even talk about Corona on stage. And I'm like, I recorded it, all 4 shows. And then I just decided to put one of Saturday nights into an album.
Wow. So. And what's the album called?
Vertically Obese.
And it's available right now.
It's available right now. You can pre-order it, and then it's everywhere July 7th, but please pre-order it because that helps.
Okay, awesome. Well, this will come out Thursday, July 2nd, I think. So
sweet.
Pre-order it. Carmen Lynch, Vertically Obese?
Vertically Obese. And then I also have a podcast called The Human Centipede.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
Check that out. Go subscribe, get the album. And I will have already said this, but Carmen, you're one of my favorite comics, and you're one of Sarah's. We always talk about how much we love you.
I love you guys.
You have one of my most told jokes that I tell everybody. The joke.
I know what it is.
I have 2 nieces. One of them's 5 and the other one's fat. It's like one of my favorite bits of all time.
One day they're going to know about that joke, but they still don't.
Oh, yeah. What can you do? Well, I mean, it happens. You can explain it to them and whatever. But I love that joke. I love all your jokes, and we're big fans. So, and also,
thank you. Back at you.
Happened to be a bonus that I had no idea you were such an anxious panic attack person. You're just somebody I like to talk to and a great comic. So.
Well, good. Then it was even better. I'm glad I was anxious for you.
No, it was perfect.
For your podcast.
No, you were awesome. It was a great episode, and I enjoyed it. And my wife was locked out like Fred Flintstone the whole time. So.
And can I put my social media on it as well? Or are you going to do that too?
No, I'll do it as well. But please say it.
At Carmen Comedian. Everything at Carmen Comedian.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Perfect. All right. Check her out.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Carmen. It was great to see you. Hopefully I'll see you in real life sometime soon.
Good to see you. We'll talk about meditation next time I see you in person.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Carmen.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Mindful Metal Jacket is hosted by comedian Joe List. Produced by Joe List. Edited by Matt Kleinschmidt. Executive producers Robert Kelly and Matt Kleinschmidt for the Laugh Button Podcasts.